Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the stories that are making headlines across the continent tonight. Nigeria and Morocco sign a deal to build the world's longest offshore gas pipeline. When it's completed in over 20 years' time, it will connect 15 West African nations and eventually lead on to Europe's shores. Tensions simmer between Mali and Ivory Coast as Bamako continues to detain 46 Ivorian soldiers. The military junta ruling Mali has told other nations to stay out of its business. Yamoussoukro says its soldiers were there for a peacekeeping mission. And we bring you a report from Zimbabwe, where a local initiative is trying to put an end to animal poaching, both large and small. But we begin in Nigeria, where they have signed a deal with Morocco and the West African trading bloc ECOWAS to build the world's second longest gas pipeline. The 5,600-kilometre offshore pipeline will serve 13 countries along the Atlantic coast before being connected to the Maghreb-Europe gas pipeline to serve European markets. At an estimated cost of $25 billion, it is slated for completion in 2046. Let's take a listen to the CEO of Nigeria's national energy company.
All the West African countries are supporting this project, and of course there's abundant gas in Nigeria. Our president particularly is very clearly very supportive of this. Our government is clearly behind this, and also that government of Morocco, and we believe that this project will be delivered on schedule and ultimately provide the opportunities for all our countries.
Well, for more on this, let's cross live to Lagos, where Sam Olukoya is standing by. Sam, good to see you. Thank you for being with us tonight on France 24. How important is this pipeline for the country and its economy?
Well, this pipeline is extremely important, not only for Nigeria, but for the West African sub-region and as far afield as Europe. For Nigeria, it will provide a lot of resources. This is a country that has one of the highest deposits of gas in the world. So this is an opportunity to exploit these resources, which has not been exploited so much. So it's a major opportunity for it to exploit these resources and generate a lot of revenue. It will also create the opportunity to harness this gas for several uses. For example, it will be good to generate electricity. Nigeria suffers a major shortfall of electricity supply. So this gas will serve Nigeria and by extension serve West African countries. It will also serve Europe, and especially at this time when there is a shortfall of supply from Russia, even though it will not reach this supply, given that it will take a long time before it's completed. But at least it assures Europe that long term it will not have to rely on Russia for energy supplies.
Well, Sam, along with gas, Nigeria is one of the world's biggest oil producers as well. But on Friday, regulators said the country was losing almost 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day to theft and pipeline vandalism. That's led to Nigeria losing its title of the continent's biggest producer. What's the government doing to rectify that problem?
Well, this is a major problem. If you say a country is losing about half its oil revenue, Nigeria is one of the richest oil-producing countries. So if individuals are getting about half this supply, then you know it's a major problem. First, it started with just a handful of individuals exploiting this oil, but now it has become a thing that so many people have keyed into, and it's continuing to grow. And it's growing because we have so many people. The government has been unable to curb it. You have security agencies who are supposed to stop this theft. They're involved in it. Local communities where this oil is coming from, they're involved in it. Oil workers, they're involved in it. So it's such a large enterprise. And even government officials, they're believed to be involved in it. So it's if the government wants to tackle this, the government seems to be fighting itself. Recently, there was devices was brought in, but even then, the device was unable to curb this situation. It's important this theft is stopped so that Nigeria can generate revenue for its economy.
Okay, well, Sam Olukoya, thank you for joining us there live in Nigeria. Moving on, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is in Washington today, meeting with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden as the two nations look to strengthen their ties.
Thank you, bye-bye.
At a morning meeting,
bye.
the US Vice President hails Ramaphosa's leadership as the South African leader faces increasing pressure back home over the cover-up of a heist at his luxury farmhouse. Ramaphosa thanked Washington for its help in the battle against COVID-19 and vowed closer collaboration on more issues facing the continent. Take a listen.
I'm really here also to discuss a number of issues with you. The empowerment of women, human rights for women on our continent, and of course health matters, how we can strengthen health infrastructure on our continent. And of course security matters as well, where we believe the United States can play a key role as the continent faces a number of challenges at a security level.
Next, the spats between neighbours Ivory Coast and Mali continued on Friday as the military junta ruling Mali warns the West African trading bloc ECOWAS to stay out of the quarrel. Relations have soured since the junta took charge in August 2020, but have worsened over Bamako's detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers, whom they accuse of being mercenaries. Ivory Coast say the troops were there to provide backup to a UN peacekeeping mission. For more, here's our correspondent in Abidjan, Sophie Lamotte.
3 of the 49 soldiers detained in Mali were released earlier this month in September, which many saw as a step in the right direction of easing tensions between the two sides. But this week, divisions deepened. Mali laid out conditions for their release and demands the extradition of political figures exiled in Ivory Coast. Among these figures are Karim Keita, son of the former president Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. There's also former Prime Minister Boubou Cissé and the former Minister Tieman Hubert Koulibaly. All of them are under an international warrant of arrest. These demands constitute unacceptable blackmail, according to the Ivorian National Security Council head. And he's also said that Mali was taking the soldiers hostage. Ivorian authorities also called for a regional council meeting with members from the ECOWAS group in a bid to find a diplomatic outcome to these tensions. For Mali, Ivory Coast is turning a judicial case into a political crisis. Take a listen at the spokesperson for the transitional government.
In response to the Ivorian government's decision to turn a legal case into a diplomatic crisis and consequently to refer the matter to ECOWAS, the transitional government emphasized that it was in no way concerned by this procedure before the community authority. It also indicated to ECOWAS that the case of the 49 Ivorian mercenaries is purely judicial and bilateral.
ECOWAS could hold a meeting as early as next week alongside the UN General Assembly in New York, and the question remains whether they'll be able to find a diplomatic solution or whether they'll have to impose sanctions on Mali, which has already been done earlier this year and had damaging economic consequences on Mali and its people.
Well, in Mali's northern city of Kidal, the junta aren't in charge there. For years, it's been a flashpoint between separatists and the army. Since the signing of a peace deal in 2015, those rebels have run local security, administration and law enforcement. Cami Nedelec has the story.
The separatist flag still decorates the walls of Kidal, even if it's officially been at peace with Bamako since 2015. These soldiers on patrol aren't from the Malian junta, but fighters from the coordination of Azawad movements. The city has been under their control since 2013. With the permission of the government, these former rebels now protect the city from jihadists. They complain of a lack of government resources, but despite this, locals say they're happy with the result.
I think that now there's a free movement of customers. People can go about their business until late. They're reassured. There's less violence. It's very advantageous.
The city is more or less autonomous from Bamako, and the former rebels are supposed to be integrated into the national military as per the terms of the peace deal. So far, 600 of them have joined Mali's army. But Azawad's armed groups continue to oversee the city's administration and runs the prisons and justice system.
Sometimes the council is overwhelmed by the large number of disputes needing to be judged. That's because citizens accept the council's authority and want to come here to settle their disputes in accordance with Islamic law.
Authorities here are concerned that the conflict further south in the country could spread northwards. Despite the area's long history as a battleground between warring factions, it has now achieved a fragile peace.
And finally, Zimbabwe is in the midst of an economic crisis, and one of the wider impacts is also affecting the animal kingdom. Poaching has long been a problem across the continent, but big-ticket items such as elephants aren't the only things being hunted, as Nadine Thuran reports.
Stretching across 15,000 hectares, Hwange is the largest national park in Zimbabwe. But in recent years, wildlife poaching has become a real problem in the reserve. 100 African elephants have been poisoned with cyanide since 2013. Dozens of animals are killed every year for a number of reasons.
There are also people who poach so that they can commercially trade. But we have discovered that in some cases, someone has lost the whole 10, 15 heads of cattle. They snare the lions, they poison the lions. They think that's a way of also revenge. But we have been trying to work with the community to educate them, and we are doing a lot with them, the traditional leaders, to make sure that at least we fight this problem.
Financed by the International Fund for Animal Welfare, the Zimbabwean authorities have been developing a monitoring station in Makona, north of the park, for the past 3 years. A 5-year program is underway. The aim is to create jobs, educate and work with the communities living around the reserve. To combat small-scale poaching, a dog unit patrols the park to find the snares that catch small game. All across the reserve, rural inhabitants trap and kill wild animals to eat. In the village of Makona, the economic situation is difficult.
If there are people who kill animals, it's to get a piece of meat.
This anti-poaching program costs $1 million every year, but its funders say it's already made a difference.
Over the past 3 years, there's not been any elephant poaching incident at Hwange National Park, which is testimony of the impact that this conservation agreement is making.
Second only to its neighbor Botswana, Zimbabwe is home to the largest population of wild elephants in Africa, an endangered species.
That's it for now. Stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up shortly.
As France loses its influence in the Central African Republic, Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Company are taking center stage.
Quand je vois ça, je suis rassuré qu'il y a la sécurité. Je suis rassuré que quand je serai attaqué, ils seront là pour me protéger.
Statues and the production of pro-Russian films alongside paramilitary presence are part of an aggressive propaganda campaign. The goal? To hide the massacres and rapes these mercenaries are accused of. But the takeover of mining resources and the Russian invasion of Ukraine are raising doubts among Central Africans.
Les Russes sont venus attaquer l'Ukraine et c'est la même chose que les Russes font pour la République centrafricaine.
The Central African Republic under Russian influence on France 24 and France24.com.